Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of AfterWords, which is a time of reflection, introspection, and discussion on the weekly message presented by a messenger from the Shrine of the Black Madonna of the Pan-African Orthodox Christian Church, brought to you by our virtual village, Bila Kuta. And this is our virtual ministry. We urge you to join us, like our programs, share our programs with others, and become a part of our movement, which is a best self movement to be the best selves that we can be. And we have a distinguished guest with us today, Mama, if you don't mind me calling you Mama, you have many accolades, Inez Kamara Brown, who brought us the message for today in honor of Women's History Month. And the message is the title of the message is Revolutionary Women of the Black Panther Party. The message was delivered, presented to you today. Hopefully, you have joined us and have questions and comments, which you can post in the chat on YouTube. We also have other invited guests, including on the lower left hand of the screen, Mama Ifeanyi Karamoku, who comes to us from Detroit, Michigan. Next to her is Mama Ama, who hails from Arlington, Virginia, and our distinguished Walimu and teacher, Walimu Olatunji, who hails to us from Atlanta, Georgia. My name is Baba Kafense, aka Dr. Chike, and we welcome you to join us as we reflect, share, and introspect in discussion on a very important topic, Revolutionary Women of the Black Panther Party. And we'll begin with a few questions, if you don't mind, Mama Kamara. I'll ask a few questions, and then we'll, of course, get your reflections. And we also, at a certain point, will have our other guests chime in with questions as well. I would like to start by saying I was very, very impressed by your message, which I thought was very thorough, very complete, and I like that you presented the main topic, but you also concluded by urging our sisters and really brothers to do something. So it wasn't like, yeah, this is just what we did, but it's that you also challenged us or invited us or showed us, pointing us in the direction to be able to move ourselves to the same level of commitment as those sisters you highlighted. So my first question is, how did you decide? I mean, what was the impetus? What was your impetus or inspiration for the message you delivered that was delivered today?
Thank you so much for the introduction and for having this discussion, the afterwards. Part of what I decided to do in selecting the women that I did was to talk to my husband. Shamari was, in fact, a Black Panther, and he helped me to get started with identifying those sisters who were outstanding, who were in the leadership. And so that was my impetus, that was my starting point. She talked about some of those sisters, the work that they did. And of course, we knew Afeni Shakur personally, the great work that she had done, as well as Rosemary Mealy, who does live here in Brooklyn. So that was the beginning part. And then I just went online and looked at the women in the leadership roles, how they created themselves to be important by establishing those positions, communication secretary, and the sacrificial work that they did, putting their lives on the line. Because yes, the FBI was out, as was demonstrated with the cards, the flashes that were there to support the message that I gave. What the FBI said its intent was, they were out to destroy, they were out to kill, they were out to decimate our organization. So looking at those women that we can identify in those movements, in those capacities, who are willing to put their lives on the line. So there are many, many others that could well have been included and that are well deserving, but we just wanted to get a snippet of some of the main women that we popularly know. But I also wanted to include Shaka Khan, because people may not generally know that. And just to have people know that you don't have to be in that leadership role and well known to be able to be a contributor to a movement and to bring your talents to help that movement move forward.
And you know, when I think about you and Baba Shamari, I hope you don't mind me calling you Baba. Of course, you're a very powerful couple, and I think your presence as a couple is so powerful, but I'm reminded by the continuation. For example, Erica Huggins, several of these sisters are still working. And when I think about you all, I'm reminded, or I think about people that were either, as you said, Baba Shamari was there as a part of this movement, but you all have continued this work. And earlier in the broadcast, there's a part of the creed that says the revolutionary spirit of God is born anew in each generation. And so for me, you are exemplify that. I also like that you cleared up this misconception that somehow the Black Panthers were in cahoots with the CIA. That's super important, particularly as our young people are so enamored by the story of the Black Panther today. I'd like to ask you, and I'm sorry if I'm maybe a little long-winded, could you maybe say a little bit about, I think this Akua, I think her name is Hampton, Fred Hampton Jr.'s mother, who was, as you all know, was in the room and she was shot when Fred Hampton was murdered. Could you talk about her just a little bit?
Well, she's here.
Shamari to help, Barbara Shamari to help as well.
Oh no, that's an excellent point. During the raid of the Chicago chapter of the Black Panther Party, and Fred Hampton was the leader of that chapter. Fred Hampton was one of the most powerful, influential Black Panthers in the entire movement. I wasn't as known as Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale and Eldridge Cleaver, but he was the one that had the spirit. So when they came after him and murdered him while he was sleeping, drugged him before that, Fred Hampton, his woman was pregnant with Fred Hampton Jr. at the time it was happening. And so they all 100, and then they said there was a shootout. But in fact, 100 bullets came in and only one was shot by the Black Panther Party. And that one gun went off and went up. It wasn't even pointed at anybody. So this was one of the most atrocious murders of a Black Panther leader in the history of our movement, along with Bunchy Carter and John Huggins, Erica's brother on the West Coast. But yeah, and she's still around today. We have a good relationship with them, with Fred Hampton Jr., and we work together. We've been there, they've been here. And so we're going to continue that struggle. And you're right, my brother, it's important to continue the struggle. Some people think the revolution failed in the 60s or was defeated in the 60s. I hear that often, but no, it was a setback. And it's a continuation because we're still here, you're still here, and many of us were around at that time and had that revolutionary fervor. We chose the electoral arena because Bobby Seale had run for mayor, and Elaine Brown ran for city council, Huey Newton ran for Congress, Eldridge Cleaver ran for president on the Peace and Freedom Party. So we figured after the 1972 Black National Convention, when 10,000 people came, and the only people to benefit was the people in the Black people in the Democratic Party. I'll behave myself today. This is my wife's day.
Our day.
So we decided to continue it and get into the electoral arena and maintain our revolutionary fervor.
I think another person too, and I'm sure you just maybe didn't think about it, was Bobby Rush, who I think is a congressman.
Yes.
And but another thing that's important about the Fred Hampton murder, in the regard of the context of what we're talking about, I think, and I go back to the point that Mama Kamara made about, or to dispel the myth that the Black Panthers were working in alignment with the CIA. What came out of the investigation of the murder of Fred Hampton is that the CIA or the FBI, the Illinois State Police and Chicago Police were all conspired in that murder. So that again, to me, goes to your point, Mama Kamara. Did you have some other things that you might like to share with our viewing and in-person audience today?
I wanted to just say that these are models, and there are others whose lives we may not even know about, who also made significant contributions. And I think it was a part of the sermon that talks about, you're not the only one, you're not by yourself, there are others. You may know them, you may not know them, But when you are working on that regard, don't be discouraged, don't give up. And when you link yourself with a group, when you link yourself with an organization, then you have more back, you have more power, you have more protection, and you have more of an impact. And that's certainly what we always want to do, have an impact on our communities and make those changes, call those changes into existence that we know are going to be beneficial to our people. And part of the research that I did talked about there were more than 60 programs. People are familiar with the free breakfast program, with the free food program, with the clothing program, but there were more than 60 different programs that the Black Panther Party initiated and conducted that were beneficial to our people. So whatever the organization is, the mission that they set out for, we support that. And we want to encourage people to be mindful that there are all kinds of aspects and qualities that they can bring to working in an organization that can be beneficial to working for the liberation of our people.
But another point you made, I think that's so essential, and you essentially responded on it. You used the term group strength, and you emphasized that these sisters were not about doing their reaching their individual goals. They were committed to our people. And I think earlier in the broadcast, there was a reference to Black love in the broadcast. And that kind of commitment can only come out of a people that, from someone that truly loves themselves and their people. So and we say, we would refer to it, and sometimes Jeremy would refer to it as communalism, that collective effort. And it can be surmised in the African adage, I am because we are. So did you have something else, or would?
Just to say that that's so powerful and so true. And that sense of communalism is an African attribute. That's how our families and our communities and our people existed in our motherland. We worked on a communal basis. And Jaramogi Ababy Ajaman in his book talks about the power and the strength of an organized group is greater than even that same number or greater number of individuals who are working in their own silos and in their own paths. But when you come together as an organized group, you magnify the numbers beyond what it is as a collective group, beyond what it is as the individuals that are a part of that collective group.
Indeed. Do any of our guests, do you have questions that you'd like to ask, or maybe reflections about how you were impacted by the message today? Mama Ifatayo, unmute yourself, please.
You're on mute. We can't hear you.
Fixed it.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to add to and comment on, I observed Angela Davis, and she was speaking just prior to you coming on, and she spoke to being a part of the struggle and how important it is to have people in the struggle that are physically able and ready to be a part of the collectivism. You spoke about collectivism and you talked about the group strength. And I think of these women all holding each other, accountable. Because oftentimes when you think about women, we have so many different responsibilities, our family, our children, many women working and still a part of this struggle. And it's that group energy, that collectivism that you spoke to that really, really touched my heart. It kind of reaffirmed what Angela Davis was saying about being ready. And oftentimes there might be some shortcomings in terms of you wanting to contribute to the liberation of our people, to being able to see all of those programs that we put out in the community to help one another to be their best. Everyone may not be able to just be there at the same time, but when you have that group support, if that person can't make it, then another sister will come in and make it. and make it happen. So thank you so much for this powerful message. It was awesome. Really, really appreciate it, especially those R's. Woo! My sister, my sister.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ooh,
So,
those R's were like, right on it. Thank you so much,
I
sister.
think another important point, this goes to what you said, Mami Fatayo, about sisters being accountable to each other. You mentioned, I think you called it the triple-headed or the three-headed monster. I hope I'm not misconstruing, but it was classism, racism, and sexism.
Right.
And this is a place where for Black women, oppression meets this uniquely to Black women. And the reason this struck a chord for me is, along with facing that in the broader society, and this is one of the things that it needs to, it's been addressed, that the sisters in the Black Panther Party had to deal with those issues within the ranks of the Black Panther Party. Because as we were called to revolution, we didn't necessarily share the baggage that came with us.
Right.
So that even to me speaks to a even more power that these sisters had, because they were able to emerge and lead even within the context of these remnants of white supremacy being operating among us. So did Mama Ama, would you like to, you have a comment or a question?
Well, I really enjoyed the talk, and I learned something, which is always good. Sometimes I would think, oh, you hear these talks, you hear the same thing over again. Well, it's a good thing to hear over again because there's so much, and when you hear it again, you're a different person, you have different experiences, and it comes to you as an additional tool. I really appreciated the threefold message about in terms of women, because it is threefold in terms of sex, race, and class, and I guess I'll just throw in age too.
Sure.
So it's just like, wow. And so I find having to re-educate myself, and that's why this talk was so good for me to hear. You always have to revisit your decisions and those things that you feel strongly about to see, are they based on your truth right now?
Right.
Or is it something that was fed to you and you accept it? I don't think anybody listening to us or on talking here cannot have been affected by the way you were raised and then give that same thing out. So you have to revisit what you were taught. And the same thing with we live in a individualistic culture, and I see us moving in that direction. So we can take a look at that. Thank you.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Walimu Olatunji.
Yes. First, let me thank you, Queen Mother Kamara, and in my own mind, soon to be Bishop Kamara. That was an outstanding, dynamic, thrilling presentation.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it in more ways than one. Made a couple of notes. First of all, the clear distinction between fantasy and reality, because oftentimes as a people, as it relates to mass media, we live in a fantasy and not in reality. Although the movie Black Panther allowed us to be able to see ourselves in the future, there were some other things that did not represent us truly. So I will appreciate that. The second thing for me is, as a historian, understanding clearly when we talk about his story, not only are Black people left out, but even more so, Black women are left out. And so in reference to unsung our stories, our women are often left out. So that was a great appreciation for the research and work that you did to highlight the role of Black women in the Black Panther Party. We all need to see it, especially our daughters. Thank you very much for that dynamic presentation. The other thing for me was the point about being organized and the 10-point program. We got a lot of issues that we're often trying to face, but oftentimes we'll come to the table without a clearly defined goal and objective. Being proactive in developing what we want based on research and evaluation is what we need to always be prepared to do. So whenever the issue comes up, we're ready with this is what we want, not let us think about it, we'll get back to you. But I think that's very important to the growth and development of our people. And then of course, the final idea again for me was the need to be organized, for us to come collectively together to bring our tools and our gifts and resources to bear on the issues of our people. I just can't say it more enough. Thank you. Very powerful, very powerful sermon.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm glad you referenced the fact that it's our story. Yes, we have Women's Her Story Month in March, but it's our story. I don't in any way want to separate us, male, female, because we have to come together. It's another attempt of the system to separate males from females, along with other kinds of strategies that they use to separate us. But certainly it is our story. We take this month to focus on women, but it is our story, our collective story, the brothers and the sisters together.
Amen.
You know, Mama Kamara, if I can, I have a confession to make. I'll put it that way, because as I was watching the sermon, I'm a critical person. I just critique things.
Good.
And at the whole that time, I'm sitting there like, wait, okay, this is a sermon. Where's the scripture? So, because we usually get the scripture at the beginning of the sermon, but
right.
I really think that you put it at the end was so powerful because you gave all of the evidence of how powerful these sisters were, and you wrapped it all up in part of your summary, I think, by saying, this is how it ties into people doing the work of God. And I think that was I think for me, that was very effective. And could you maybe say a little bit more about how these sisters work and the work that you do, you and your husband and your family, and the work we do is actually work that we've been called to do, just like those sisters you talked about in Romans 16, 1-4.
It's the work of liberating our people. It's the work that we've been called to do. And someone talked about finding the purpose and knowing that the purpose is inside of you, and we've got to fulfill that purpose. So before our entry into the political realm, we were each working in organizations and in our professions to do the work. So my gift and my love and my calling is teaching. So I was with the Board of Education in New York City for 36 years before I even entered anything in the political arena. And the gift that I have was for me to be able to use the system of education. And I was fortunate enough to be in an environment, in a building that was led by a Black man who was conscious and bold, and his name was Carlos Edwards. And he developed a cadre of Black teachers, and we were able to teach from a Black perspective. So that was the gift that I had, that I was able to develop, teaching Black history, teaching Black consciousness, teaching Black beauty and Black awareness to young children from early ages. And I was able to exist in that kind of forum for 18 years, showing teachers, listen, this is what you have to teach. This is the material, this is the objective, but you can use any content you want to be able to achieve that objective of what you want children to learn. And we developed that kind of curriculum, and we did have a leadership team that we worked at, Dynamics of Leadership, where we again talked about our Blackness and centered ourselves in our history. And we took that curriculum to various campuses across the nation. And then Shamari became involved in the political arena. I said, okay, sweetheart, that's what God is calling you to do, to be a catalyst for the liberation of our people in that format. I'm with you 100%. And then 5 years after he came into that, while I was retired, people said to me, well, listen, there's an opening coming, and it's going to be in the assembly. And we think that you should run. And I said, listen, I'll get back to you. I'm going to talk to God, and I'm going to get back to you. I'm enjoying my retirement. I put in my work. I put in my time. I'm enjoying finally getting a garden in front of my house. But I spoke to God, and God spoke back to me. And after like 9 months of going back and forth and deliberating, God told me, yes, I want you to get into this arena along with your husband. And I want you to be able to show people that they can be bold, they can be unapologetic, they can be independent of the system, and that they can bring resources to the community in that regard. So that was how we got into that. We were both doing things prior to getting into the political arena. It's not something that we had on our list of things to do, but it's something that we both heard God say, I want you to bring the resources to the people and show them that you don't have to be bowing to the establishment and kissing anatomy parts that you don't generally kiss and saying things that are not true. That, you can call the emperor out, you can say the emperor has no clothes. And if that's the reality, then people will be able to see that for reality. And you can call out the system that is not delivering resources to the people, that are not giving them what they need, that are contrary to what Christ says in the Bible. We have to comfort the poor and give them resources, and that we can use the system to show how that can be done.
Brother Chief, I just have to say this. I was a little nervous when she said she got to talk to God, because a month went by and I said, did you hear from God yet? Another month went by. So then I had to change my strategy. I said, Sister Kamara, Sister Inez, sometimes God speaks through people. So God could have already spoken and told me to tell you. That didn't work, Brother Chief. I had to wait 6 more months before I got an amen.
All right.
What we want to do in that regard also is show people through our accomplishments in that arena that they can do the same. And we talked about the models that we talked about in the Black Panther Party. And we know that the Shrine also recognizes that, because Jaramogi talked about getting involved and supporting a particular person in the political arena for a specific office. So that's what we want to try to model for our people as well.
Yes, and he was the first African-American to run for governor in Michigan through the Freedom Now Party, I think in 1962 or 63. Listening to both of you speak reminds me that, wherever we are, we're doing big things, and we're always going to resist oppression. And in the context of education, I think just in our struggle in general, we can't sleep on New York at all, because as I heard you talk about education, I was reminded of 3 giants in the educational realm, at least for me, and I'm an educator as well. And that's G2 Weusi.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Mama Ya Asantewaa.
Yes.
Zinga, and also, I can't remember the sister's name. She was on the board of regents for years.
Yes.
So
Adelaide Sanford.
That revolutionary spirit emerges wherever we are, because it's God's calling that we fight against tyranny and oppression. And I see our dear sister, longtime friend, Lieutenant Shaquala, who hails to us from Atlanta, Georgia, or I should say from Detroit by way of Atlanta, Georgia. I see your hand is up. Did you have something you would like to share with us?
Yes, I just want to thank the Queen as well for that very empowering message.
Thank you.
You are truly an educator, Queen. As they say, you took us to school. We learned something today. As they
Thank you.
say, you will learn. We learned something today, and I just want to say thank you. The sisters that you presented, a lot of people don't even know about that. Who should know about these queens? They do not know anything about it. It surprised me that people don't even know that Assata Shakur is still alive in Cuba. It surprised me. So I just want to thank you in regards to that, because you brought back memories when you made her, even though they say least but not last, Assata Shakur was your last person. Yeah, I personally know that sister. I visited her when she was in prison. Yes, indeed. And I love that sister forever and ever. And she is truly, truly a living legend. And so I just want to just thank you for bringing that message today and educating us. It was just absolutely empowering and inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant Shakwala. We also have joining us Major Takeda K. Did I say it correctly? Hello? You're muted. Please unmute yourself.
You're muted. You're mute.
Turn your microphone on, please.
We can't hear you. Major, we can't hear you. Your mic is not on.
We can't hear you. Turn your microphone, unmute yourself. She's frozen now.
Oh.
Okay, can you turn on your microphone, please?
You're muted.
Click the red icon in the lower left-hand part of the screen. We have no audio. So while we're waiting on Major Takeda K to get her audio together, maybe she's gonna come back in. Did anybody else have anything that they would like to share with us?
You're muted.
I have a question for Mother Kamara. Mother Kamara, do you know of any models or programs for teachers? Right now, our teachers are being confronted with the critical race theory and all of what that brings to the classroom. And I recall you speaking on how you were at this dynamic school for 18 years and you were able to teach from an African perspective.
Yes.
Oftentimes within our community, our teachers are hushed in teaching about who we are and all of the accomplishments of our people. And right now, our government is trying to crush the voices of our teachers being able to really, really teach and teach from our perspective. Do you know of any models or programs where teachers can come together and learn about how to teach from an African perspective?
I have to say, I don't know that any that I can share with you, but I do want to say that we've talked about that at the Shrine, talking about how we can develop a curriculum that would be meaningful. And I also want to say, I did read the legislation that Georgia has in place, which has restrictions on teaching. And I'm not a lawyer, but in looking at it from my untrained eye, there are still ways that we can get our message and the content of what happened to us as a people and not violate that law until we can see how to change that law. Again, I'm untrained in law, but as I read it, there are ways in Georgia that we can still get the content of African history taught. It says you can't, I don't remember the particulars, but I'd be willing to work with folks to look at how that can happen, how we can look at, particularly in Georgia, because that's, we're members of the Shrine, even though we live here in Brooklyn, that can still get the message of our history through and not violate what that law says. And I'd love to be able to have a lawyer look at it and see if my interpretation is correct and look at how we can continue to teach in that regard.
And I would just like to add, we didn't have Negro politicians and we had African politicians. They can take that issue up in the state legislature. In New York City, we have the Amistad curriculum that we fought to have in the New York State education curriculum. We're still fighting for them to implement it. We got it passed, but now we got to fight for it to get funded and implemented. Dr. Molefe Asante wrote an excellent book on history. And we took that book and to the chancellor, the former chancellor here in New York City, gave him the book. And he said he'll work to get that book put in the curriculum. See, there's a lot of things that can happen by way of elected officials. And instead of us, just having a first black this, first black that, we got a black president, black vice president, black, black. Let them have a black curriculum, an African curriculum be taught in the schools. And so these politicians, we need to do more than just talk against Trump. That's easy, talking against Trump, but what are they doing for the education system and getting an Afrocentric education curriculum done?
I think if I may respond to that, and I think some of this, Mama Ifatayo, I don't think you shared with the group that you're a retired educator yourself. Our history is replete with models of teacher training. Council of Independent Black Institutions, which grew out of Uhuru Sasa School, grew out of the East. There at Aisha Shule here in Detroit. The African-centered education movement grew out of the community control of schools movement in New York. So I think there's a ton of references and resources, and even what we're facing with this emergence of critical race theory, it's not anything new.
True.
We've been responding to this in the classroom ever since, because the standard curriculum is what Eurocentric and white supremacists. So in the early phases of the African-centered education movement, G2AOC, who left the community control of schools movement, teachers, families around the country began to come together and create educational institutions, and they developed curriculum materials to counter the racist narrative in the curriculum. So we have, I don't want to rant more, but I'm willing to join or help, as you suggested, Mama Kamara, and I can help point to some of those resources. And even the Council of Independent Institutions still has teacher training institutes and things like that as well. So there are sources there. I see Major Chikadike is back. If you still would like to speak, we'll take you next, and then Wally Mu'olutunji.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to give praise and thanks to Mother Kamaria for the wonderful sermon. I learned a lot. Things that I knew, you reinforced and reminded me. And I loved how you put emphasis, on education, because I'm here in Florida, and we know, what's going on in Florida and Ron DeSantis, right? They want to erase us out of the history books. They don't want us to have a curriculum at all to be included in the schools. And so now what's happening here in Florida is that the NAACP wants to put a travel restriction for African-American Black people as far as coming to Florida and spending their money. Now, however, they did not say boycott or strike or protest. They just said a travel restriction because they want some changes to be made. And Ron DeSantis is taking it as a joke. But this sister means business. And I see that you mean business. You took care of business, you're taking care of business, and you're training and educating us to carry it carry it on. And I can appreciate you for that. You talked about the reassess, recalculate, reaffirm, and relaunch.
Yes.
And that can be taken and used in any aspect of our lives as Black people, in any platform. And if you could, I don't know if you have a curriculum that we could follow or more information to help us to include that in our programs and the things that we do on a daily basis to help with the struggle, I could appreciate that. And I want to thank you again.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So that model or that paradigm that I've come up with is really things that we know. As a teacher, I would try to make it memorable. So that's why I got the 4 R's to be able to do that. But it certainly is applicable to so many situations in our lives and individual lives, as well as in our organizations. You know, doing this, where are we now? Doing assessment, where are we now? You know, okay, what do we need to change to make sure that we can achieve what it is we want to do? And then the affirmations, the words are so important. And then finally, okay, this is what we're going to do, everybody. Everybody's on board, and make it an announcement for that. So those are principles that are generally applicable to so many situations. I just wanted to try to make it memorable with the 4 R's.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Walimu Olatunji, did you have a comment? And after this, we're gonna wrap the session up. We'd like to ask you to have, if you have some concluding comments, Mama Kamara.
Waiting for me?
No, I was waiting on Olatunji.
Okay.
Walimu Olatunji. Walimu Olatunji, do you have a comment? Unmute yourself, please. Okay. Mama Kamara, I'm not sure what's happening.
Okay, I'm unmuted. For some reason, my mute button locked up on me. But let me say very quickly about curriculum. We do have curriculum. Of course, as a part of Shrine of Black Madonna, the Akiba Land program has been developing curriculum for years. And so we can start there. But in Atlanta, a few years back, Dr. Jerome Harris, also, he was the superintendent for Atlanta Public Schools. He brought in some of the grandmaster teachers, Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, and many others to develop an Afrocentric curriculum. He was actually fired from the school system because of that, even though the grades of the students went up under that curriculum. But then also another monumental historian and activist, scholar, Dr. Asa Hilliard in Atlanta, also worked with developing curriculum and was a part of putting together baseline essays in every subject matter toward that curriculum. And so we have access to that information that we are more than willing to share with those who have interest. And then for us at Atlanta Cultural Center, we've just unveiled an online African history class every Saturday on Zoom, and where we're teaching Black history is free and open to the public. Let me just give the Zoom ID for those who may be interested.
Put it in the chat.
Okay.
So people can write it down or copy it.
Yeah, 848-0974-9151. And we'll put that in the chat for you, 848-0974-9151. And so for those who are interested, we're more than willing to share curriculum with you and continue this discussion.
You know, what you just said for me speaks to the reach and depth of the Pan-African Orthodox Christian Church. I talked about the African-centered education movement in Detroit. There was a movement, an independent movement outside the public domain of public education that occurred for about 25 years. And there was a parallel movement within Detroit public schools that Detroit Public Schools actually went from adopting and designating 11 schools as African-centered to the whole board declaring itself an African-centered school board. And this all happened under the leadership of a sister that is also a Shrine member named Dahia Shabaka, who was over social studies for DPS. And for me, going back to that idea of this work being the work of God and how it manifests through us, she was doing that work, as was the brother that you mentioned in Atlanta. And we did some of the things here, but of course we could go on and on with this. We'd like to ask you to give us some closing comments, please, Mama Kamara. You're muted.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to have had this discussion and for the opportunity to have presented the message in Atlanta last Sunday. And in terms of the question, there's a question in the quote, did the Panthers support any forms of spirituality? Not that I know of, but there were many spiritual people who were associated with the Panthers. So they were supportive.
And there were churches that allowed the Panthers to run their program in their churches. So they had a lot of support from the clergy, but it was a political organization.
If I could just interject, I'm sorry, but if what we're taught, what the Jews Jeramogi Abebe left us with, the God is cosmic energy and creative intelligence. For me, that's all the energy in the universe. So we have to expand how we think about spirituality, because their work, if their work was divine, then it goes without saying that it was spiritual.
True, good point.
I still want you to have the last word, Mama Kamara.
Just to say that thank you for the opportunity. And what I want to say is, to God be the glory for what you've learned. It all came from God. All the glory, all the praises go to God. Thank you so much.
Ashe and amen. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. As we go from this place, we say that everybody go in peace, continue to stay safe. Remember, we've been warred upon in addition to COVID and all of that. So stay strong, stay up, and just stay strong in the struggle. Have a peaceful week.
Thank you. Asante Sana. Peace and blessing.
For Harry.